right, let's talk about one of psychology's most famous and, as you're about to find out, most misunderstood stories. It's a concept that seems to say something really unsettling about who we are when we're in a crowd. But what if the story that launched 1,000 psychology textbooks wasn't the whole truth? Let's get into it. It all started right here with this single, chilling sentence. This was published in the New York Times, and it painted this absolutely terrifying picture of a city full of people who just don't care. This one line grabbed the world's attention. So the story that everyone heard was pure horror. A 28-year-old woman named Kitty Genovese was attacked on her way home. The attack wasn't quick. It supposedly went on for over half an hour. The killer even left and came back. She screamed for help, lights flickered on in apartment windows, but the story goes that nobody did a thing until it was way, way too late.
And bam, from that one event, a huge theory was born, the bystander effect. The idea is kind of strange when you think about it. The more people who see an emergency, the less likely any one person is to step up and help. It's like our personal sense of responsibility just dissolves into the crowd.
But a couple of psychologists, Bibb Latané and John Darley, they weren't satisfied with easy answers like people are just apathetic. They figured there had to be something deeper going on, something psychological. So they set out to find a real scientific reason for why we sometimes freeze.
So they identified these 3 major mental hurdles that stop us from acting. First up is diffusion of responsibility. That's the classic, oh, someone else will handle it feeling. Then there's pluralistic ignorance. This is where we look around to see how others are reacting, and if no one else is freaking out, we kind of tell ourselves, well, I guess it's not a real emergency. And finally, there's evaluation apprehension, which is just that simple, powerful fear of looking stupid or messing up in front of everyone.
They even mapped it out into a 5-step decision process. Think about it. To actually help someone, you have to clear every single one of these hurdles. You have to notice it, realize it's a real emergency, feel like it's your job to do something, know what to do, and then actually decide to do it. A no at any point along the way, and you stay put.
And they tested this stuff for real. In one of the most famous experiments, students in separate rooms heard another participant suddenly have what sounded like a seizure. Now get this, when they thought they were the only witness, 85% of them rushed to help. But when they believed there were 4 other people listening in, that number dropped off a cliff all the way down to 31%. For decades, studies like this seem to prove the bystander effect was just a sad fact of human nature.
But this is where the whole thing gets turned upside down. Because that foundational story, the one about the 38 people who did nothing, the story that started it all, it was mostly made up.
And that makes you wonder, right? What happens when the very foundation of a famous psychological theory just isn't true?
So when journalists and historians really dug into it, the original story fell apart. There were nowhere near 38 eyewitnesses. The attacks actually happened in a couple different places, so nobody could have seen the whole thing. And here's the most important part. People were not apathetic. Some people yelled out their windows, some called for help, and one woman, a neighbor named Sophia Farrar, actually ran down and held Kitty in her arms as she died. She didn't stand by at all.
The thing is, the myth of Kitty Genovese became this powerful parable. The story of 38 silent witnesses was just so shocking, so dramatic, and so much easier to tell than the messy, complicated truth. It was a great story, but it wasn't the real one.
So if that myth is wrong, what actually happens in a real crisis? Well, modern research, using actual real-world evidence, paints a completely different and, frankly, a much more hopeful picture.
For half a century, the controlled setting of a lab told us one thing, but a lab is not a dark alley or a busy street. So recently, researchers started analyzing something new. Thousands and thousands of hours of CCTV footage of real violent conflicts as they actually happened.
And the results were, well, stunning. A huge study in 2019 looked at 219 real fights in 3 different countries. And they found that in 91% of those cases, at least one bystander stepped in to help. 91%. It turns out helping is the norm, not the exception.
This completely flips the classic bystander effect on its head. See, in the weird artificial world of a lab, more people meant less action. But out in the real world, when the danger is clear and present, more bystanders actually make it more likely that someone helps. The crowd becomes a source of support, not just an excuse to do nothing. And modern neuroscience helps explain this too. When we don't act, it isn't usually a cold, calculated choice. It's more like a tug of war in our brain. There's an instant, automatic freeze response that's all about our own safety. But that's competing with a slower, more thoughtful system driven by sympathy, the part that wants to help. So what we call apathy is often just that initial freeze response winning out for a moment.
Okay, so this new science is way more hopeful, and it has real-world applications. It's about understanding that initial hesitation not as some deep moral failure, but as a mental hurdle that we can absolutely learn to overcome. It's about going from being a bystander to being an upstander.
And you see these dynamics play out everywhere today. School bullying, where kids just watch, assuming someone else will step in. Harassment in the workplace, where people are afraid to speak up. And of course, online, where the crowd is massive and it's so easy to just keep scrolling. In every case, the answer isn't to shame people, but to give them clear, safe ways to intervene.
So how do you actually do it? How do you become the person who helps? Well, it comes down to these steps. First, just pay attention. Second, trust your gut. If it feels wrong, it probably is. Third, and this is the big one, you have to consciously decide, okay, I'm the one who's going to do something. And fourth, act. And probably the most powerful thing you can do is break that diffusion of responsibility by pointing to one person and giving them one job. You, in the red shirt, call for help.
So, let's wrap it up here. For more than 50 years, the bystander effect was a story about our collective failure. But the new evidence, the real-world evidence, tells us the opposite is true. That our instinct to help is actually incredibly powerful. The question isn't, why do we fail anymore? It's, how can we empower the helper that exists in almost all of us? The next time you see something, remember that helping is the norm, and the choice to act is yours.